All right, third demo video today. So we are working on more glowing, but we are working on multiple sources that all have equal amounts of light to them. These are super blown out, exposed bulbs, very bright. So by now you're gonna get tired of me saying it. You need to make everything else darker. For those to feel bright, 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 we need to make the rest of the world dark. So I'm starting by just blocking things in. I've got a lot of water and just a thinned out wash with water. I'm not using any gel medium really, to just start blocking this in. I'm using a navy, works for me, and a large brush, which is making me a wee bit sloppy. It's fine. So I've sort of drawn in where all of the bulbs go. We're going to end up painting those white because I'm working on a gray background just because. I did realize as I was working through this, you'll see later I go to put the texture on the wall. I should have put the texture on the wall right before I put that yellow down. Really should have. So I end up having to do that later and then re-glossing it. It's fine. If you are doing this and you want the texture on the wall, I'd do it earlier. Like, because then you could do a big bold texture and the layers would go over it and it would blend in. It'd be fine. So first attack here is I want to warm up all of the areas where the light is going to bounce. We're going to end up re-warming this and tweaking it a few times, so it's just a base layer. So I'm using water and an orange to sort of start blocking that in, kind of an orangey, sunshiny yellow, and I'm using a bit of it also on the mirror face to show that there's like warmth bounced all the way around it. I also just stopped drawing by the bottom of the mirror, so I'm not doing all those bulbs and I'm not doing the little counter. You're on your own for that one. I wanted to add a little bit more turquoise into my wall color, especially up around the top. It also helps bridge the gap from that yellow into the blue. If you can get a little bit of green in there, you're getting something to kind of hop you over where it gets weird. So when I'm working in super wet layers like this, I would usually let it dry, but since I already know we're going to have to make these white, I'm using white with a water in it to make soft circles, bigger than the bulbs that they will be, but kind of like soft exposed circles because we actually want the glow to be a little like diffused around the edge. You can see where the bulbs, like they have a really bright center, but there's a soft glow around them. So I'm using this opportunity while the other section is drying to go ahead and start building that out. I lay it down first with this wash with white with water, and then I'm actually going to dip my brush in just clean water and a little bit like soften the edges of these as they're drying. They're reflected in the glass because of course they are. And also add a little bit of highlight, a little bit of white into where it bounces across the bright of the wall. So we're also changing the value of the wall, not just the color temperature. So I'm going to go ahead and let this dry and we will come right back. Here we are, that section is dry. So I'm taking yellow, a thin amount of yellow with a bit of water and doing the outside edges of these bulbs. Where it is on top of white, it's going to be really bright. Where it is on top of the blue or the background, it's going to be a lot softer because it's very translucent. But on the white, it's going to tint it to be that nice, bright, lemony yellow. Also playing with adding in some of the actual details that give the mirror structure, the backing, the edges of it that give us dimension. Very important. Now you can already see how much brighter those bulbs see. We could all kind of already imply that they are very nicely glowing, but we're still going to work a little bit more on the background and other pieces here to really throw them forward. So here is where we're going to stipple in some of this texture on the back wall. One way that you could do it, which is what I'm going to show here first, is to kind of stipple in some texture. That is where the paintbrush hit my camera. It was sad. And then use your palette knife to drag it down so it has this kind of like organic edge to it. If you use a different shape brush, diffuse it differently, you're going to get different shapes when you drag it down. I liked the fan brush because it was a little more like scattered and less harsh on the edges. And then the palette knife just really softens it so we're not seeing individual points, we're seeing sort of this like peeled paint effect that you can kind of see on the wall. Now I'm using a bit of clean water to also soften all those edges while they're drying by brushing over them and allowing that to kind of like sit. It's helping them not have so much contrast between them and the background. I did that layer with a bit of white and kind of gray, blue-gray, so that it should blend in with our world behind us while also having a higher value. I'm going to go ahead and do some of the writing on the mirror. with a fine tip brush, and I'm doing it in red, and then while it's still wet, I'm touching in a little bit of the white so that it gets a little bit of bounce even on the lettering. So with some water and a little bit of yellow and a little touch of white in it, I am going to go ahead and do a little bit of a forced glow around each of these bulbs where they are reflected on the mirror, and adding some warmth in that area so that you can see the bounce light there. It is not as obvious in the research image. That's a bit of an exaggeration I'm doing to sell that that's a mirror, because there's nothing reflected in it, obviously, and it doesn't have a high shadow or a high highlight, so it makes it hard for us to be like, oh, that's a mirror. So we're doing a little bit of exaggerating. Here's where I'm adding in back in some of that nice warmth bounce that you're seeing. And then to help everything feel more glowy, I'm going ahead and deepening all of my shadows 1 or 2 more times to help them recede, to help throw the lights into higher relief. I will also do one final touch on those bulbs, making them as white as they possibly can go before we call this done. But a little more stippling, because I'm playing kind of a balancing game between it getting lost in the washes and where I still want it to come through. Since the background is wet, it's going to get a little diffused. So here it is, it's dried, and I've decided I still want those shadows to be even darker so that the bulbs seem even brighter. I like to lay down paint with a little bit of water in it and then wash my brush and use a wide filbert with clean bristles to soften my edges, because I think that that's just a nice way to kind of get the brush strokiness out of it. And especially since we're kind of carrying down the shadow to make little like domes around each of those lights to show how they like individually glow instead of just creating a wall of glow, it's nice to have that amount of control to kind of soften the edge. But we have, this is what, the third or fourth layer of shadow. So as you keep going, it does get easier also to blend the edges, because as they overlap with each other, you kind of inherently create some nice focal like layering. I'm also darkening the shadow on the mirror itself. Got a little bit inside my yellow there, so I wiped it off. Because I just think it could use a little bit more contrast once again with the bulbs themselves. So we're going to go ahead and deepen the mirror as a whole. And then I will do just final touch of white on the center of each of those bulbs, and we will be right back. So here's our final result. You can see it's got a nice glow on it. I went ahead with a colored pencil and added those very soft highlight lines you see across it. They're not in the research image. I just thought it helped a little bit. And overall, the wall has that little bit of texture, has a nice sense of glow. Your light is there. Hope that helps.